Ladies and gentlemen, it's almost time to start our engines, but we won't yet. We are so delighted to have you with us. And one of the things that you were just treated to was the Blair School excellent musicianship of the string quartet that just played a Mendelssohn piece. And for all of you active tweeters, that's not a Twitterer, right? I get confused sometimes. All of you who want to tweet, please know that this is our hashtag, fill the airwaves. Let's see if we can trend. Would that be cool? I mean, you know, when you trend, you're famous. But what you just heard was an example in music of why we're here. You were all too busy, and that's wonderful, having conversations to notice that when the quartet started, the chief violinist stood and did a solo. But that's not how the piece is written. The piece is written with this Italian language notation, SoLI, which is very, very different from solo. Solo is when the person with the instrument and the stage gets to do whatever the soloist wants to do. SoLI is of a totally different nature. SoLI is when the artists working in unison and in complementary ways bring multiple voices to a piece of music that could never be done as well as when they each step back and allow another to lead. And so if you look at music notation and you see the word SoLI, it's a direct instruction to how the music is to be played, which is what you just experienced. An incredible piece of music played by incredible artists, each of whom deferred to the other, so that the outcome was literally heavenly. That's why we're here today. Because we think that in law, which is in desperate need of innovation, we can't do it as solos. We can do it SoLI, which ironically was not even in our mind when we decided we were going to call this thing the Summit on Law and Innovation. And then we discovered why we had chosen that after the fact. But we are not soloists in the law anymore. We used to be. This is my 40th year of practice. I was a soloist. I did what I did, and I did it with great joy and enormous waste. But waste was once profitable. I mean, I sold a lot of waste. Had some really nice cars, beautiful homes, vacations to beat the band. But I was selling waste. The clients are saying to us today, no more waste. It's time for you to start selling efficiency. And here's the deal. We can't do that as soloists anymore. But we can do it as SoLI. And so what we're here today to do is to try to break down the silos and begin to build a community of interest dedicated and focused on doing law differently. In fact, the way our clients have been insisting that we do it for quite some time. That's why I'm so excited. Because I know the people in this room are SoLIs. We are not soloists anymore. So I am beyond excited to see what comes out of today. And my colleague, Kat Moon, will introduce you to our first session and how things are going to roll out. But you need to know before we get any further that Kat Moon is no longer just an adjunct professor. Kat today is the director of innovation design at the Vanderbilt Law School. Yeah, please. And you'll hear more about what that means as we discover how we can begin to build collaborative solutions. And I'm honored to know that I get to work at a law school that thinks that's valuable. So Kat, come teach us.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to see everybody here. I'm going to step up here very briefly. Welcome. It's wonderful to see a full room. We're a sellout crowd, and that's incredibly exciting. We also are being live streamed, so if you turn and face that way, you might want to smile and wave at the camera, at the rest of the world watching us. We do have some viewers in Helsinki, Finland this morning, so I think that's kind of exciting, some of my friends from Helsinki. I'm going to get right to it because all of you are here today to hear from, learn from, share with the amazing people who are going to be taking this stage. And I'm going to introduce first the Dean of Vanderbilt Law School, Chris Guthrie, and he is going to kick off our first session with a primer talk, and we're going to listen to Dean Chris Guthrie now.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. On behalf of the law school, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you to SoLI. I'd like to open with some thanks, beginning with our sponsors. For media support, I'm grateful to Above the Law and Distributed Media. For marketing support, I thank Reina Corp and Legal Win. Our innovation sponsor is Latitude. Our evolutionary sponsors are Accord Project and Ross Intelligence. And our revolutionary sponsors are Deal Whip and IBM. Will you please join me in recognizing our sponsors? I also want to thank several members of the law school community for conceiving of this conference and for making it happen. Professor J.B. Rule, Professor Larry Bridgesmith, Professor Kat Moon, two extremely talented and dedicated faculty assistants, Ray Torres and Ingrid Laubach, Gina Newton, and Brandy Drennan. I have been asked to offer a law dean's perspective on innovation in American law schools and legal education. I take this on with some trepidation for at least a couple of reasons. First, I can't possibly speak for law deans in general, as we are a varied and ever-changing group, so I'm limited to offering you what may very well be my own quite idiosyncratic perspective as one sitting dean. Second, I'm not an expert on the topic I've been asked to address. Everyone in this room knows more about innovation in the legal industry than I do, and many know more about innovation in law schools. So because of this, I decided that rather than stating a view on innovation in legal education, it would be more appropriate for me to use my time this morning to pose a question about innovation in legal education. Perhaps somewhat irreverently, I thought first about posing the following question: why should law schools innovate? Now that probably seems laughable to most in this room, but let me try to explain why it's not. The United States is the global leader in higher education. In any credible assessment of the world's universities, American universities dominate, generally accounting for most of the top 10 and well over half of any top 100. Likewise, the American legal system, despite its notable flaws, remains the envy of much of the world. Our constitutional order is widely emulated, and our private law rules govern the way business is done, not only in the United States, but also in most global transactions. American law schools, therefore, sit at the intersection of two of America's leading contributions to humankind: higher education and law. This means that American law schools are in many ways the model for legal education around the globe, the world's leading training ground for lawyers, and the world's leading repositories of legal scholarship. For this reason, it is not crazy to ask why American law schools should even be worried about innovating. But the problem with this view is at least twofold. First, the past isn't necessarily prologue. Industry leadership changes, and industries and institutions come and go. The simple fact that American law schools have been world leaders does not necessarily mean that we will remain so. Past performance, as they say, doesn't guarantee future results. Second, the practice of law for which we are preparing our students is changing, and that requires us to adapt, particularly if we remain a highly expensive post-baccalaureate degree program. We simply cannot turn a blind eye to the profession for which we are preparing our students. So instead of asking why should law schools innovate, I then considered posing the following question: why don't law schools innovate? This question probably resonates more with many of you. But I think this question too misses the mark because it misunderstands both innovation and law schools. Innovation, of course, is nothing more than the introduction of a new idea or method, and American law schools have introduced a plethora of new ideas and methods. Yes, we still teach contracts and torts in the first year using mostly appellate cases and some version of the Socratic method, but that does not mean that law schools haven't changed. Let me mention just a couple of many innovations. First, legal clinics. Now, to be sure, legal clinics have existed for some time. Indeed, the longest continuously running legal clinic, which is housed down the road at the University of Tennessee, was founded 70 years ago. But clinics have exploded in recent years. Last year, American law schools offered nearly 1,500 live client legal clinics with more than 30,000 seats available to law students. Of particular interest to this audience, more than 50 law schools offered a legal clinic in which students represented entrepreneurs or startups. Second, many law schools, I don't have numbers, but I'm confident it's a healthy majority, have created the functional equivalent of majors for law students, allowing students to specialize in certain subject areas in ways that were not previously possible. Let me identify a couple of Vanderbilt examples. First, we offer our students a vibrant law and business program that includes multiple components. I'll mention just one. About a third of the members of each JD class at Vanderbilt earn a certificate in law and business concurrent with their JD. Students who earn the certificate take 5 required classes: corporations, securities, accounting, corporate finance, and a taxation course, and several hours of electives from advanced law and business courses. Electives include such course titles as M&A Deal Dynamics, Law as a Business, Advising Corporate Boards, Negotiation and Drafting of Key Corporate Documents, Hedge Fund Compliance, Negotiating M&A Deals, and Private Equity. These courses didn't exist when I was in law school. The second Vanderbilt Law School program I'll mention is our newest program, our program on law and innovation, which is hosting this very conference. This program is home to several participating faculty, sponsors conferences like this one, as well as our annual symposium on artificial intelligence and the law, and offers our students a robust curriculum that includes courses in legal technology, legal project management, human-centered design, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. So the question I've ultimately decided to pose this morning is not, why should law schools innovate? Nor is it, why don't law schools innovate? But rather, the question I intend to address briefly this morning is, how might law schools innovate more? To address this question, I will begin by acknowledging that we innovate within constraints. So I will first identify what I perceive to be some of the primary constraints to increased innovation in legal education. I'll describe 5 innovation barriers. Having identified these barriers, I will then identify ways we might break through or at least work around them. So I will describe 5 such innovation opportunities. And finally, I will conclude with a couple of predictions. So I see 5 major barriers to increased innovation in the legal academy. Innovation barrier number one is what I might call institutional mindset. Lawyers, as most or all of us know, tend to have a healthy respect for doing things the way they have always been done, that is, precedent, as well as a truly remarkable ability to identify all the problems associated with any proposed course of action. Lawyers, in short, are risk-averse. And law professors might be even more risk-averse than lawyers as a whole. After all, law professors have typically turned their backs on financially lucrative but uncertain careers as practitioners for the security of tenure. As an example of this mindset, I'm focusing my remarks today first on barriers and only second on opportunities. Innovation barrier number two is human resources. When explaining why big law firms seem to resist innovation, I believe it was Richard Susskind who made, or at least repeated, the astute observation that it is hard to persuade a room full of millionaires that something is wrong with their business. Law professors aren't making seven figures, at least at Vanderbilt, but I might make a somewhat analogous observation about law faculty. It's hard to persuade a room full of tenured faculty with almost unfettered autonomy and free choice to change their business model. And even where faculty see the need for innovation, they might not possess the requisite skill set. After all, the modal tenured faculty member practiced law for a couple or perhaps a few years, and once on the tenure track, many faculty become disconnected from the day-to-day realities of the profession, making it difficult to devise innovation that fit those realities. Innovation barrier number three is law school governance. People outside the legal academy are often surprised to learn how little power a law dean has. Woe is me. I have no power to hire a faculty member, even an adjunct professor, to promote or tenure a faculty member, to fire a faculty member, or even to offer a new course. All consequential decisions in a law school, and many trivial ones too, are collective. So law school decision-making is more like the legislative process than executive action, and a law school dean is more like a Speaker of the House with a modicum of agenda control than like a president with the power to issue and enforce executive orders. I can usually decide what gets to the floor, but once that matter is on the floor, it belongs to the full faculty. So simply put, asking a law school to innovate more is akin to asking Congress to innovate more. This means that even if a law dean wants to innovate more, and of course she may or may not want to do so, there are very real limits on what the law dean can actually do. And oh, by the way, law deans like me typically come from the law faculty, so the human resources challenges I mentioned earlier also apply to deans. Innovation barrier number four is regulation. We are directly regulated by the American Bar Association, and we are indirectly regulated by state bars, the Association of American Law Schools, usnews.com, and other entities. For the most part, this regulation provides important consumer information and protects prospective and actual law students, as well as the clients they will eventually serve. So I'm not here to advance an anti-regulatory view, but some of the direct and indirect regulatory requirements impose significant costs on schools that limit our financial flexibility to innovate more. Speaking of financial flexibility, innovation barrier number five is law school finances. Last but certainly not least, the law school business model, like the higher education model generally, is a challenged and challenging one. On the revenue side, most law schools have one primary source of revenue, JD tuition dollars. And most of those dollars come from one source, the federal government in the form of federal student loans. I would guess that most private law schools and many public law schools receive the vast, vast majority of their revenue from JD tuition. On the cost side, most law school costs are either actually fixed, in the case of faculty, staff, salaries, and library, for example, or effectively fixed in this marketplace, in the case of financial aid. I would guess that salaries, fringe benefits, library, and financial aid account for approximately 90% of expenditures at most law schools. Given limited sources of revenue and mostly fixed costs, law schools don't have the resources it often takes to invest in more innovation. So to this point, I've identified 5 innovation barriers: institutional mindset, human resources, law school governance, direct and indirect regulation, and finances. How might we break through these barriers, or at least work around them? Let me identify 5 innovation opportunities. The first is the university. Most law schools, not all in America, but most, are part of a university. I dare you to find a university that doesn't publicly celebrate how interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary it is. Indeed, in this day and age, I think a university could establish a distinctive and maybe even a unique brand for itself by championing disciplinary insularity. This interdisciplinary moment, which I don't think is going away anytime soon, and which I don't think should go away ever, creates an opening for innovation in law schools. Take, for example, Vanderbilt University, which has created a multi-million-dollar fund to support so-called trans-institutional initiatives involving faculty from different schools who combine to develop research and teaching proposals. This kind of university investment can create opportunities and make available resources to support efforts by law schools in partnership with engineering, computer science, business, and other disciplines to develop legal technology, methods, and other innovations. Innovation opportunity number 2 is human resources. I identified human resources as an innovation barrier, but human resources may also create innovation opportunity. Many of the tenured and tenure-track faculty populating law schools are not interested in or inclined to invest in increased innovation. But the tenured and tenure-track law faculty are only part of the faculty at most law schools. Law schools may find it easier to innovate by developing relationships with and investing in other members of the faculty, including, for example, practitioners who can be hired as adjunct faculty or professors of the practice, secondary faculty who hold tenured appointments elsewhere on campus but who are interested in forging relationships with the law school, clinical faculty, particularly those who are leading clinics devoted to entrepreneurship, startups, and law and technology, and research librarians. Law librarianship has changed because of the digital revolution. Increasingly, law librarians come equipped with the kind of digital know-how that will enable them to contribute meaningfully to innovation efforts in law schools. Innovation opportunity number 3, new revenue streams. Where innovation leads to revenue, law schools will follow. As I mentioned earlier, the law school business model is challenged, and law schools and law deans and the universities of which they are part are hungry to expand and diversify revenue streams. Opportunities might include new degree programs, non-degree programs, distance education, external grant-funded research, and even the development of new technologies and processes that might be monetized. If these ventures hold out the realistic hope of a return, particularly if the initial investment required of the school is negligible, many law schools will indeed embrace these kinds of opportunities, and many have. Innovation opportunity number 4, new employment opportunities. Since the Great Recession, American law schools have reduced enrollment by approximately 30%. Today, American law schools graduate about 37,000 students each year, rather than the 50,000 plus at peak. Unfortunately, however, there are only about 25,000 entry-level lawyer jobs available each year, and that's true for the foreseeable future. So we continue to face market disequilibrium. Now, placement is more of a challenge at some schools than at others, but all law school faculty and staff want to see their students and graduates find their way to fulfilling careers. Just like law schools are more likely to innovate when doing so breeds new revenue streams, law schools are more likely to invest in innovation when doing so creates meaningful employment opportunities for their students and graduates. Innovation opportunity number 5 is partnerships. This is the final innovation opportunity, and I think perhaps the most exciting is the opportunity for law schools to partner or affiliate or collaborate with external entities. For generations, law schools and their home universities have been fairly reluctant to embrace affiliations with nonprofits, government entities, and in particular, private entities. In today's environment, however, this has changed at least a bit, spurred in large part, I think, by the rise of tech transfer and also the partnerships between universities and platform providers in the distance education space. During the time I have been dean, we've formed affiliations with 1 nonprofit, a governmental entity, and 2 for-profit companies. These kinds of affiliations and partnerships are much more feasible now than they have ever been, and the combination of human capital and financial resources made possible by these affiliations can facilitate more innovation in law schools. So there you have it. As promised, I've explored how law schools might innovate more by identifying 5 innovation opportunities while acknowledging 5 innovation barriers. So who wins? Well, the tie ordinarily goes to the runner. And I think the runner in this scenario is the innovation proponent rather than the defender of the status quo. So I do predict that we will see more innovation in law schools. I also predict that this innovation will come slowly, at least as judged by this audience, come from unexpected places, and will not prove disruptive in the Clayton Christensen sense, but instead will prove complementary to the basic legal education model currently in place. So let me end where I began. Thank you very much for participating in this conference. With great regret, and I truly mean this, I'm boarding a plane in about 60 minutes, so I can't stay with you this morning, but I view this as the beginning of a set of conversations, and I invite you to reach out to my colleagues and to me with your ideas, arguments, and proposals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Guthrie, for the wonderful welcome and the challenge to consider the challenges faced and the opportunities presented. And I would like to point out a couple of things before we go any further. You will note on the tables there are some moleskin journals. Inside is a schedule for the entire day, and it includes Twitter handles for everyone who is going to be taking the stage. So I encourage you to share with the Twitter sphere as we go through the day any brilliant ideas or things you might question or challenge. Put it out there on Twitter. We would appreciate it. Before we proceed as well, I wanted to warn you that we are going to be getting quite interactive as the day goes on. So another purpose of the journals is to give you a place to record ideas and thoughts as you are listening to folks speak today, because we are going to be engaging in what hopefully will be some rousing table talks. And then at the end of the day, we are going to conduct a human-centered design boot camp, a design sprint, and you definitely will be highly engaged at that point. So I encourage you to record any brilliant tidbits you hear as the day goes on. And I will, before I introduce our next round of speakers, we have 4 Ignite speakers who are going to take the stage. I want to let you know that there will be an opportunity for Q&A before we engage in table talks. So also jot down any questions you might have while you're listening to the speakers. So without further ado, we are going to proceed, and I'm going to invite our next round of speakers to the stage. If folks could come up at this point. Thank you. You may just go grab a seat. So we are going to hear next from our first 4 Ignite speakers. So we have Elizabeth Ramirez, we have Casey Coleman, Ritu Khanna, and Allison Carroll. And again, without further ado, I am going to invite Allison to share her talk with us next. So please welcome Allison Carroll.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Kat and Larry and Dean Guthrie, for putting on just such an amazing, promises to be an amazing day for all of us. So I'm the Assistant Dean of Law and Technology at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, where I'm also on the faculty and teach through our Center on Negotiation and Mediation, which is actually how I first met Larry years ago through the ABA section on dispute resolution. And this connection between law and technology and dispute resolution will hopefully become a little bit clearer as I go through my talk. And I just want to see, are there slides available there? Yay, okay. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about developing a model for how we train these 21st century lawyers, using some examples of innovation in legal education over the years. We actually have a number of, we have a number of examples of success where schools are starting to train law students in these 21st century competencies. Vanderbilt is a great example through its program on law and innovation. Suffolk, Michigan State, at Northwestern, we're certainly trying to broaden these opportunities for our students through courses, extracurriculars, student groups, conferences that we're putting on to expose students to the very needed training to be best prepared for this changing landscape in technology or in legal services. But a number of these initiatives tend to be pretty discrete. So they are singular courses, applied technology labs that touch only a small subset of the students at these law schools. And so what I'd like to ignite a conversation is how we can ensure all students receive information and training in these 21st century competencies. And what do I mean by 21st century competencies? We are talking about the T-shaped lawyer that many of you know. As Dean Guthrie said, this has got to be complementary to a deep understanding of legal knowledge and skills. Adding to it, the T-shaped lawyer adds project management, process improvement, legal technology, design thinking. There are a few other models we can look at. The plus-shaped lawyer, or a new model that came out of a working conference at Michigan State last weekend, which is the delta-shaped model, both of those adding to a base in legal knowledge and skills, and the project management, process improvement, legal technology, adding to it a third component, which has got to be our ability to build trust, empathy, have emotional intelligence to connect with our clients to truly help them solve their problems. So how do we do this? So I mentioned I teach in our Center on Negotiation Mediation, and it's through that work that I actually first met Larry Bridgesmith. And so I want to go back to my original area of expertise, which is dispute resolution, to say that we've been trying to innovate law school education for a long time from the ADR field. We've been saying these practical problem-solving skills are really important. And so schools have been developing new ways of incorporating skills throughout its curriculum. Michael Moffitt, who is a professor and recently dean of Oregon School of Law, characterized these various models as islands, vitamins, germs, and salt. Let me just describe these real quick. So the island model for incorporating skills is one in which a school develops or dedicates immense resources to this area. So in dispute resolution, be devoting resources, faculty to dispute resolution. Legal technology and innovation, same idea. Where the school rises to the top of a sea of other law schools that aren't necessarily devoting these resources to become unique and specialized in this area. So an island, sort of a standalone initiative. Vitamins. Vitamins is where the law school says this is so important that we are going to require our students take a daily dose of this skill to ensure that they are best prepared for whatever area we're trying to train them in, dispute resolution, legal technology. Where this has been most successful, and yes, this was innovative at a time, is in our legal research and writing curriculum. It was not always the case that lawyers received in their first year curriculum legal research and writing training. But we now have every single law school with required curriculum in this area, and that is the vitamin model. The germs. This is sort of my favorite. This has been my approach with legal technology and innovation. Germs is where faculty who are not necessarily known for being experts in that area surreptitiously or clandestinely incorporate some of these things into their curriculum. So I teach in the Center of Negotiation Mediation. I teach my students to sit in the middle of disputing parties, face-to-face communication skills, how they're going to problem solve and help others resolve disputes. But that doesn't mean I don't think that legal technology and innovation is important. I think it is imperative. So in my mediation courses where they're getting certified as mediators, we also do a project where they must identify challenges in the delivery of mediation services, and they must design and develop solutions, often tech-based solutions, to those challenges. I am trying to help them see that no matter what area they are studying or practicing in, they need to be innovative in their thinking. I did not get permission to do this. My course is called Mediation Process and Advocacy, so there's nothing that is raising a red flag to my faculty that I'm doing this. But I am putting it into my curriculum because I think it is pedagogically appropriate for them in this class. The germ model. Other examples of the germ model will be faculty who think critical legal studies or are enamored with law and economics and incorporating in their con law classes or otherwise. So we have examples of how people are using this germ model. But the last one, the SALT model, is the one that I think could be most helpful and informative for us as we think about how we're going to incorporate legal technology and innovation in law school curriculum. The SALT model says any good cook knows that in order to enhance the flavor and ensure that the meal that has been prepared is as flavorful as possible, sprinkle a little salt. Not too much. Sprinkle a little salt. So the SALT model says that in our traditional courses, our doctrinal, our skills, our clinics, doesn't matter. Throughout the curriculum, we sprinkle a little salt. So we sprinkle a little bit of this legal technology and innovation within the course. So you can imagine a contracts class talking about blockchain, smart contracts, or a drafting, doing an exercise on drafting using human-centered design to ensure that the contract actually can be understood and followed by their client. So the SALT model says that we can incorporate within our otherwise traditional law school curriculum, but ensure that all students are receiving exposure to these 21st century competencies. Dean Guthrie did an amazing job of identifying the number of implementation issues, so I won't go through those, except what I will say is that these issues have been identified in other attempts to innovate law school curriculum. And we can look to other areas to see how to solve this. So we have answers on how we help motivate faculty to add this into their courses, how we provide them resources, training, or experts who can come in and teach a module in their course, how we can provide them with teaching materials. And so I encourage us to look at, yes, innovate and new ideas, absolutely, and I'm excited about this afternoon, but we can look to other models as well where innovation actually has occurred in law school curriculum, maybe 70 years ago, and in incremental steps, but it has occurred, and we can use that to inform what we want to do moving forward. So I really look forward to our conversations this afternoon and to hear from the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
And now, Ritu, I invite you to speak, please. Thank you.
Great. Is the mic on? Can everyone hear me? And I guess someone's going to be managing my slides. Great. Well, I titled this talk A Brave New World for Aspiring Lawyers for a reason, because there is a brave new world out there that's being led by technology, and I'm going to speak to you about that in a little bit. I first want to start off by saying thank you to Kat and Larry and all the organizers for this wonderful and very important event. And also, I just want to say from a personal perspective, ever since I was a child, I've been a great admirer of the American universities. I grew up in India, and I thought that the best thing that could happen to me was studying at an American university, and I managed to do that for my master's program, but it's a real honor to be here and speaking at Vanderbilt. So, a little bit about me. I am the Executive Vice President of Strategy and Business Development for LexisNexis. And what that basically means is that my team, so Patrick's at the back in my team, and he's attending this talk as well. So my team and I spend, well, all our time looking at trends that affect the legal services industry. And, you know, we have to look at everything that's coming in, not just market trends. And of late, what we've been looking at is technology. I mean, it's everywhere, and you know, there's all these talks about robot lawyers taking over the world, but I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. So, as many of you are aware, this is an industry brinked on the poise of change, and I would like to talk to you about three things. The third thing I cannot profess any competency in. It's what Alison and Dean Guthrie already spoke about. How should the law schools be innovating, and how should the models change? I did a bit of research on it. It's my last slide. And I had to end up talking about first principles. So we'll get there in a minute. Next slide, please. So I want to start this journey off by taking you back into time. And I think it's important to do that, to really think about the last 30 years and to look at the major trends that we've witnessed in this legal services industry. So what we did just for our own conceptual model, this is not written anywhere, this is just something my team came up with. We said, let's try and understand the industry in waves. And we actually worked backwards because we thought that we are at the cusp of a brand new wave. And so starting up from the first wave, which we believe was, you know, going up from the 90s until 2008, we saw the digitization of the workplace, and we saw the internet and personal computing drive greater productivity, research, and writing and communication became much more efficient. And in many cases, there was higher quality as a result. Law firm demand growth was high, and the industry was very profitable. If you recall, that's what Larry was talking about the lovely cars and homes and vacations. In the second wave, which we call right sourcing, we saw a real tightening of the legal industry, and we believe this happened as a result of the recession, driven by legal budgets no longer being seen as sacrosanct. Corporate legal now needs to do a lot more for less. You know, there are falling collection rates resulting in a flat demand, and corporations refuse to pay for activities that they used to. Corporations are looking for lower cost alternatives, fixed fees, and creating margin pressures for law firms. This is particularly true in the UK, where I used to live about 10 months ago, and in London we see the fixed fee arrangement quite common. It's not so common in the US yet, but very common in London. So today I think we're at the cusp of a new wave, and we call this wave the post-industrial economy. So what exactly is that? So we've identified four key trends that really define the new era and define what's coming. And I'm going to go over them quickly. So data proliferation. Everybody's talking about, you know, this is a data economy. What does that really mean? In the United States, we've seen a long decline in the relative importance of manufacturing and physical outputs as opposed to information. This trend has been exacerbated recently by some dramatic shifts in the technology landscape. And every single industry is now being forced to adapt. Every single industry is being forced to work with what we call enterprise data, to understand the different sources of data at their disposal, not traditional sources, but data that's hidden in emails or within systems. The amount of data in the world doubles every 2 years, which means that the level of available insights is constantly and dramatically increasing. For example, each tweet on Twitter has more than 140 metadata tags. That means that every single tweet has 140 additional data insights attached to it. And that stat was taken from before Twitter increased it to the 280 character limit, which I'm not sure was such a good thing. The next wave that we see is the Internet of Things. We are now bringing the physical world and the digital world together via the Internet of Things, making it possible to collect new data and develop new applications connecting the digital world to our everyday physical lives, from cars to home appliances and a lot more. The third area is cognitive technologies. We name this really broadly because when we talk about technology, everybody's just talking about AI and machine learning, but we think that this is a much broader set of technologies. The data that I've just been speaking about has to be organized and contextualized and turned into insight. And we think that cognitive technologies like natural language processing, in the case of the law, because it's language-based, machine learning, including all sorts of algorithms, are helping us make sense of data out there in ways that were never before possible. We can now actually mine insights from disparate data streams. We can use algorithms to process and normalize huge corpuses of data, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how we've been doing that. And finally, blockchain. Casey's going to talk a lot about blockchain. We had a fascinating dinner conversation about it last night, and I'm excited to hear his talk. So I won't say much, but blockchain as an infrastructure technology, we think that that's an important technology in the next 5 to 10 years. We think it's in its infancy right now, and I'd be very interested to hear other perspectives. But we think that it could create fundamental change across a number of industries, including legal. So what does this all mean for the professionals of tomorrow? And we have a bit of a hypothesis here. Nobody can see the future. But our hypothesis is that law firms will need to embrace technology and the changes that come with it. We think that to get to a place where attorneys and advanced technological solutions are working together, law firms will need to understand and bring in technologists into the firm. This is the way to drive value for clients, and lawyer skill sets will need to adapt. Some people will tell you that AI is going to replace the associates of tomorrow. Others will tell you that every lawyer needs to know Python. Well, we've done extensive research on this in our team, and we've looked at the power of technology to disrupt the existing legal workflows, be it transactional, be it a litigation workflow. We've looked at the power of automation, task by task in my team, to try and understand what % of lawyers' workflow and tasks are going to get automated over the next 5 to 10 year horizon, and which technologies are going to make that happen. And let me tell you, you'll be relieved to know that these sorts of claims are overstated. The vast majority of tomorrow's lawyers will, like today, be attorneys first and foremost, and do not need to be technology experts. And that might be a controversial view, so I'm looking forward to hearing from the room. They will, however, need to be comfortable with data and cognitive technologies and understand the basic principles, as well as the limitations and flaws of technology. So those are the associates of tomorrow. On the other hand, we are already seeing forward-thinking firms building out their information and knowledge management teams, and we have at LexisNexis what we call a CIO and a CTO forum with law firms. And we keep hearing from them about them bringing in data scientists to help their lawyers be more efficient and to arm their lawyers with data-driven insights. And we believe this will continue. So that's on the right-hand side of the slide. We think that there will be data scientists and technologists required in the firm. In between the lawyers and the data scientists, we think that there is a real opportunity for law firms to build a small subset of professionals with deep technical expertise in both the law and in technology, who we are calling legal technologists. We think that these legal technologists need to translate and facilitate work between these two domains. So to explain what we mean by that, we think this will be similar to product managers and corporations who translate customer needs into coding requirements and have a deep expertise on how the technology and the data side can really help solve problems in the legal domain. We think that the best of these legal technologists will be in very high demand. So, moving on, a little bit about LexisNexis and what we're doing about this. So LexisNexis started as an information aggregator. So you'll see on the y-axis, we aggregated primary law, static information, statutes, case law, etc. In the first wave that I mentioned, most of what we did was provide this information and let the lawyers understand it, access it via a database. We provide a little bit of curation, and over the last 20 years or so, we've increased that curation, and what I mean by that is armies of 5,000 people who are editorially enhancing that information, adding metadata and tags to that information so that it can be mined and searched better. We still do that today. We have a long way to go in improving that particular service, and I particularly think that we can be much more user-friendly in our products. We can be much more intuitive. We can create better browsing and search capabilities, and we're working on that. What we found, and just as an aside, that it's not easy to create a search for really smart lawyers, because our customers are, I think, the most intelligent and smartest people that we ever deal with. And so search has been one of our holy grail difficult areas to try and really search the corpus of legal information and bring up relevant insights for our lawyers. That's something we're working on. But that's today. That's not the post-industrial economy. That's not really looking forward. And we can't stay static. We can't just make our tools more usable, improve search, and hope that we'll be in business in 100 years. We won't. So we need to look forward, and we're looking forward by investing in what we call decision tools and analytics. We think that we need to create a new set of products and a new set of services, a new set of value for our customers that's focused on creating contextual insight, that is focused on delivering insight extracted from these huge reams of data that I mentioned earlier, and provide them with tools that help them make better decisions and deliver better outcomes for their clients. And most of these solutions, so on the right-hand side on the top, you'll see some product names like Lex Machina, Lexis Answers, IntelliGize, and Ravel. These are manifestations of that philosophy and that focus in our strategic plan to really improve not only today's solutions, but focus on what lawyers will be using tomorrow. All of the tools on this right-hand side of the page are using cognitive computing technologies. And it's not usually just one technology. People think that it's a couple of AI algorithms, but it's not. It's actually a huge combination of 5 or 7 or 8 technologies. Sometimes we need to build specific engines that just do one thing in order to really mine the insights out of the information. Finally, the topic that I profess I don't know much about at all. Law school's challenge to adapt to this new world, this brave new world. So I reduced this particular slide into 4 key principles from the perspective of thinking about first principles. What can law schools do? And I think that there are 4 areas: value, teaching, program length, and specialization. I will leave you with this particular opportunity, and I think that a lot of law schools are already stepping up to this value. Today, even as outcomes for law graduates grow more and more divergent, we see little reflection of that in the cost of tuition. In order to continue to attract quality students and place them appropriately, we think that law schools need to develop a more compelling value proposition. where students' investments are reasonable and justified. There is a team member on my team at the moment who is going to be going to law school. He's going to Stanford in the summer. And you know, he helped me a lot with this slide, and he was telling me about taking on this massive amount of debt to do something he really loves, and you know, the thinking that he has to go through to justify that, and hoping that the outcomes will be worth it. One way that I think law schools can achieve this is by reducing the length of law school programs for some students. There is a place for the traditional 3-year doctrinal program in tomorrow's market, but it's not necessarily the one that most lawyers will need to invest in time and money, because they may be areas of the law where they may not be practicing once they graduate. This brings me to a point about teaching. In recent years, law schools have increased clinical offerings, which is great to see. Continuing to increase focus on the practice of law, especially by providing experience with legal technology tools, will help future practitioners to be better prepared on day one as attorneys. And at the end of the day, the fourth principle, specialization, I think that increase in specialization will increasingly be required to reflect the specialized nature of law practice. This means getting out of the silo of law school, and students who are interested in practicing IP spend time with the engineering school working on real-world engineering problems, and students interested in international human rights, for example, work with the public policy school. And as I said, I see a lot of law schools are already doing this. They're replacing what I think is a one-size-fits-all approach to legal education with one that reflects and prepares students for unique roles that they will take in tomorrow's legal ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ritu. Casey, are you ready?
I am.
We're ready for you.
I don't have slides, I'm just going to chat. So when Larry asked me to come here, he asked me to say, from your experience, what's wrong with legal education? And I thought, well, is there a lot to say or a little to say? How nice do I want to be? My name's Casey Kuhlman. I'm the CEO of a company called Monax. We build a blockchain-based contract management system. I am an alumni of this law school. I also worked for this law school as a contractor for a little while, so I have a little bit of a keen understanding of Vanderbilt itself, particularly Vanderbilt Law School. And for a long time I was a practicing attorney, mostly doing small business work in Africa, first in West Africa and then in East Africa. And after that, I decided to become an entrepreneur and work in the legal tech space. So I have a little bit of a broad perspective here, and I have some opinions as to where I think lawyers can be helped to go from good lawyers to great lawyers. And I'm going to talk about it two particular areas where I think legal education can set up entry-level practitioners to really become great lawyers a lot quicker by having a little bit more of an emphasis in these two areas. But before I begin, I'm going to steal something I read a couple of weeks ago from a blog, and my apologies, maybe the person that wrote this was is in the room today or is watching, so my apologies that I forget actually who wrote this. So I cannot cite it, but the quote sort of stuck with me, and it was that a recent survey, one of these sort of hand-wringing surveys, oh, law is all screwed up, what are we going to do about law, surveys, and there are a lot of those these days. It asked inside counsel, what's wrong with outside counsel? And inside counsel said, outside counsel doesn't know my job or doesn't understand my business. And then the survey went on to ask the business units from the inside counsel's companies, what's wrong with inside counsel? And the business unit said, they don't understand my business. And I think that this is a really compelling point of view, and it matches, particularly as I've moved over to being an entrepreneur and out of the practice of law, it matches my experience tremendously. And I've had because we're in sort of emerging tech and operating in a global marketplace, I've dealt with corporate counsel in London, deal counsel for our sales deals in San Francisco, trademark counsel in New York, and a whole range of different counsels in between. And so when I was preparing this talk today, I wanted to take a step back and say, when have I resonated and actually enjoyed my time with counsel as a CEO of a small company? And when have I thought, well, you know, I might as well DIY this, which I realize is a horrible thing. You know, you should never be your own doctor, you should never be your own lawyer, but sometimes it is compelling to DIY, particularly if you don't think you're getting real feedback and real advice from counsel, and you are a lawyer. And it's easy to say, well, they don't understand my business, but if you try to unpack that and try to challenge yourself to say, well, what does it mean to know my business? I think there's two big areas where entry-level lawyers could be helped, and where practicing attorneys probably need to take a look back. And the first one is risk. A lot of lawyers take the mindset that their job is to say no. Everybody might be familiar with the joke about computer says no. I think that many lawyers think that their job is lawyer says no, and that's the end of their job. And that's fine. If you're sitting in outside counsel, you can say, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. Or if you're sitting in inside counsel, we shouldn't do that as a business. That's the easy answer. And frankly, it's a lazy answer. But a lot of why lawyers end up there, I think, comes back to a little bit in how lawyers are educated. We teach in law school issue spotting. And issue spotting is great and it's important, but it's incomplete. And we also teach in law school, I don't know what the current trend is, but when I was in law school, it was sort of the IRAC model as an analytical model for thinking through issues, right? Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. And if you talk to a risk management specialist, they would look at IRAC and say, well, that's an interesting analytical framework, but it leaves out the two most fundamental components of risk management. It completely leaves out, as sort of an analytical framework, the ideas about risk likelihood and risk severity. And it does an okay job on mitigation, it does an okay job on issue identification, but if you're looking at an analytical framework that risk analysis specialists use, they start with risk identification. That matches typically to, it maps well, I should say, to issue spotting. And then risk management specialists go through a process of identifying the likelihood and severity if this risk actualizes. What does that actually mean for our business in real-world terms, in money terms today? And in my experience, lawyers are horrible at this part. They see an issue and think, you're going to get sued for doing that. Okay, well, is this I'm going to lose my business if I get sued over this issue? Or is this, I'm going to have to pay, somebody $5,000 and it's going to go away issue? Those two things are completely different to me as an entrepreneur. One means I need to pay attention to it. One means, well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. If I got money in the bank, probably I don't care about it, frankly. If it's, if there's other things that are going on that require me to move in this direction and take this risk. And so this idea of understanding the severity and likelihood of risk management, in my experience, it's one of the components that makes a really actually great lawyer instead of just an average good lawyer. When I am engaging with counsel and I can tell that they understand this idea of we're going to go through an identification of risk, we're going to analyze it from a severity likelihood before we even worry about what the rules and analysis of those rules, and then I go to a conclusion are, then I know that I have a counsel that I'm probably going to come back to, probably going to buy more services from. because they have a more keen understanding of my business, even though they might not actually know everything about what we're doing with the blockchains, what we're doing in a globalized marketplace. All those things might be a little bit foreign to them, but that's okay for me as an entrepreneur if I can tell that this lawyer has an understanding of risk and risk management, sorry. And the second area I think that young lawyers could be better prepared for the real world is around process management. And here I don't actually mean necessarily legal process. I don't necessarily mean project management. For a lot of folks in this room, obviously will be familiar with LPM and project managing delivery of a certain project to a client. That's not actually what I mean here. I mean project management from the point of view of the ultimate consumer of what a business or transactional lawyer is doing. Which are the business units within the client. And we have an understanding as lawyers of process. And I think actually we have a pretty good understanding of process as lawyers. One of the big problems that I have is that the output of that process thinking are a bunch of documents that probably only other lawyers are ever going to read. And that's not a very good, that's not a very good output stream, because it doesn't really help you embed yourself, and it doesn't really lend credibility and trust that you understand the actual business problems that the end client is facing. And so having some analytical frameworks that allow you to model in perhaps not prose, perhaps in business process diagrams, which business units routinely are much more capable of understanding. Perhaps having some movement in that direction could go quite far, in my opinion. And currently I'm talking my own book because our contract management system relies heavily on business process modeling, which are formalized process engines that we apply to contractual processes. And these two components, I'm up against the clock here, but these two components I think are absolutely essential. And while I apologize for not going deep into what is a blockchain, I think these are actually two of the really important prerequisites for getting at innovative things. Because as a legal innovator or as a legal technologist, or which I like from Rita's talk, we call them legal engineers, but it's the exact same idea. To be actually good in this space, you need to constantly ask yourself, how can I help those that have deep legal knowledge leverage that knowledge into scalable products that can increase our revenue stream as a law firm, as a solo practitioner, as inside counsel, etc. And to do that, you need to have a keen understanding of risk and process. And if you have a keen understanding of risk and process, your ability to think about and to design scalable legal products as opposed to bespoke legal services, the way that we've been doing things for the last 100 years, is drastically improved. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Casey. And we are going to hear from our final Ignite speaker, Elizabeth, in this initial session. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Kat, for having me. It's great to be back. I also went to Vanderbilt Law School, graduated in 2010, haven't really been back since, so it's great to be here. And thank you to Casey for not having slides. I also opted not to have slides, as I think it wouldn't be true to my, my nickname of the hacky lawyer. So I thought I'd hack my way through this presentation. When I was asked to speak on a panel about innovation in legal education, I thought, haven't really thought about legal education in a long time. I've been so busy practicing. But I reflected on my own time here at Vanderbilt, and started to think about what worked for me and what didn't in setting myself up for an innovative legal career. So to explain what that is, I'll just give you a little bit about my background. I am a principal and partner at a boutique blockchain practice based in Washington, D.C. called Ouroboros LLP. We currently are a 3-partner firm, but very busy, as you can imagine. I am also full-time global policy counsel to a blockchain-based identity startup called Evernym, which is also well known for its sovereign technology, which some of you may have heard of. So I have 2 full-time jobs, effectively, and they are both in very complicated areas of emerging technology. As an undergraduate, I studied classics, and in law school, I spent a lot of time exploring the music scene in Nashville and having a life outside the law school. So you might ask, how do I advise clients on blockchain, AI, machine learning, and all the rest? So this is the subject of my talk, and I came up with sort of 5 recommendations for law students. So hopefully there are some law students in the room. If not, hopefully some are watching the live stream. But I thought, what better audience for innovation legal education than law students themselves? I'm a big proponent of taking your legal education in your own hands. So law schools are great in providing some of it, but law students also bear responsibility. So those top 5 recommendations, I would say the first one is get out of the library. Seriously, law students live in the library. You cannot become a hacky lawyer by holding yourself in the library and burying yourself in books, Facebook included, which is what a lot of law students do, right? So you have to get out of the library and test and experiment with the ideas that you learn in the classroom. You have to put them into a context and an ecosystem. And Vanderbilt offers myriad opportunities for this. So I actually think it's one of the best law schools from that perspective. For example, the externship program at Vanderbilt is unparalleled to any other. I spent my 3L fall working full-time at the Department of Justice, learning about FISA litigation, which is something I could have never learned in the classroom. There are opportunities for, we talked about clinics earlier, Vanderbilt and Venice, other international opportunities. There are all kinds of opportunities that are beyond the scope of the law school and the library. So it's important to get out there and put these ideas into practice. The second recommendation I have is very unpopular, which is get away from lawyers. Get away from lawyers and get away from law students, because spending time with those people will only amplify your echo chamber and increase your myopia. And you need to expand your perspective. So spend time with, business people, entrepreneurs, technologists, students from other disciplines and graduate schools, the community, artists. Increase your perspective because, believe it or not, your clients are not going to be other lawyers, right? They're going to be other people that are doing really interesting things in other industries and have different perspectives. So someone mentioned empathy. You can't build that empathy if you only spend time with folks who are like you. So get away from the lawyers. You'll have plenty of time with them in the future, I promise. The third recommendation is, this one's obvious, but often forgotten in law school, which is focus on your mental and your physical health. Law students always think that they don't have enough time. And for law students paying attention right now, you have nothing but time. You will never have this much time again. I promise you, not to do the things that you want to do when you want to do them, either because you're having to do things you don't want to do, or hopefully, if you love what you do, you're going to want to keep doing it. So you have all the time in the world now to kind of set those things in motion, to focus on your health, focus on your mental health and well-being, prioritize your habits, form the habits early on so that they carry you through, which is through a very demanding and very high-stress career. And the role of a lawyer is only getting more complicated, right? So those things are going to become increasingly important. And in a less obvious way, the more that you focus on those things, the more that you can form those habits, the happier you become, and the more likable you are, right? And people want to work with people they like, and people want to work with happy people. So, lawyers get a bad rap for kind of being stressed out and unpleasant to work with. I think if we can, ingrain those habits early on, it makes for a much more pleasant work life thereafter. The next thing I would say is, do you. Stay true to you. So there's a lot of pressure as a law student and an emerging lawyer to conform to a lot of things, from how you dress to how you act, to what you do, to how you think. And with all due respect to OCI and OCR and whatever it's called these days, the law is so much bigger the world is so much bigger than big law, right? And there's so many career paths out there. And I think law schools need to do a better job of, telling lawyers that you don't have to become an associate, a first-year associate, then a second-year associate, third-year associate, all the way up to partner. But there are so many different things you can do, and even beyond just, going in-house or into government or into, there's so much need, increasing need, as we can see from what's happening in this convergence of law and technology, that there really isn't anywhere that can point to that a legal mind and legal training wouldn't be a useful asset. So think about what your interests are first and foremost, develop those interests. If you don't know what they are, I had no idea. One of the things that drove me crazy in college was when people said, focus on your passions or do what you love. I thought, gosh, what does that mean, And I just hacked my way through it. So I just tried everything until I found things that, brought me back for more. And I think that's really the best approach to take is, especially people at Vanderbilt, you're in Music City, right? Get out there, explore, try everything until something really, like I said, just strikes a chord. And then as you do, no pun intended, and then as you do that, once again, you become a more pleasant person, more fully developed and interesting person, and no surprise, those are the folks that people want to work with in the business world, right? So stay true to you, and resist that the easy path. And yes, there are things that are, going to make you a lot of money or things that you're really good at, but focus on the hedgehog, right? So this notion of the hedgehog concept is the notion of finding the intersection of what you're good at, what you love, what you can make money doing, and in that intersection of those three things of your passion and your strengths and what's profitable is kind of your where you're probably going to be the most productive and the happiest and the most effective as well. So focus on the hedgehog. And then there was a fifth thing, the last thing I would say. Yeah, well, actually, it's all of these things combined, I guess, which is despite everything I'm saying about, get away from lawyers, get out of law school, at the end of the day, remember that you are the lawyer, okay? So I don't know how many Silicon Valley fans there are, but as Ron LaFlamme puts it, lawyer, not lawyer. I got you, right? That's the idea. It's, there are so many, because law is becoming so murky and law and technology are converging, and you hear developers saying code is law, and you've got business people and advisors and VCs and bloggers, and everyone's a lawyer now, right? Everyone's providing legal advice. I spent a lot of time working on blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and yes, everyone is opining on the Howey test and everything else. At the end of the day, you are the lawyer, okay? You went to law school, you got a degree, you took the bar, you have special training, you've been cultivating these skills, and you have to stand your ground. And you have to remember that, yes, it's important to have empathy, it's important to understand other people's perspectives, it's important to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand their business model, as Casey was saying, but you also have to be confident that there's a reason you're in the room, there's a reason that you're there, and there's a value add that you have and a skill that you can provide. And so it's really hard sometimes when, especially in places like Silicon Valley where everyone hates lawyers, or with technologists where, again, there's kind of a natural aversion to legal practitioners. I think it's really important to just remember why you're there. So with all of that, I would say I'm really excited about this event, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussions. I'm so happy this is happening, as I said, at my alma mater, and thank you all for being here, and I'd love to meet some of you in person later. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank all of you, and as I was listening, I definitely heard some themes, some common points that popped up in slightly different ways, I think, in the different talks, and to my knowledge, none of these folks talked beforehand, right? You all came with what you wanted to share, and so I'm fascinated by the fact that I saw some common themes and elements. So does anyone have a question for any of our Ignite speakers in this first session? No burning curiosity?
Oh, come on. There are questions. Yeah, I knew it.
Yes, and if you just raise your hand, a microphone will come to you.
Hello, Tony Vellini, DePaul College of Law. Question for Elizabeth. You talked about other careers for lawyers, and I've noticed sort of this emerging area of data privacy officers and DPOs, and I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about these alternative career paths besides going to a law firm.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm actually CIPP, which is Certified Information Privacy Professional in US and EU privacy law. And, and you see that as a really popular emerging area now, obviously with GDPR forthcoming and the privacy regulation. And it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I sort of reluctantly got those certifications because why not? You know, someone was paying for them, that kind of thing. But I don't actually think there's that much value add. I think it's more learning by doing. So I think the alternative careers are, I mean, it's really infinite, right? I mean, I think, and you don't necessarily have to be practicing either. I think there's a lot of utility in legal training, legal thinking, legal design that isn't necessarily as a practicing lawyer. I think everyone on this panel has probably participated in myriad hackathons in the last couple of months, right? I mean, it's becoming increasingly popular. And I think you see hackathons bringing together a lot of industries that haven't talked to each other before that are catching on to the value of the notion of a legal architect or legal technologist, or was it legal engineer that Casey called, or hackular in my case. So I think it really depends on what the individual's motivations and passions are, and I just increasingly, because of the changing nature of the legal practice and the function of a lawyer, I can't think of one environment, ecosystem, or industry where you wouldn't want this skill set.
If I can just introduce you to two folks who are here who are very passionate about that question. Tunji and Alex, where are you? Okay, these are folks who are very, very passionate about democratization of legal data, meaning no more Facebook problems. How do we get to a place where what's private is private and what can be shared is shared with security around it? So talk to Alex and talk to Tunji, because they are passionate about solving that problem. Big, hairy problem. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Larissa Lidsky. I'm the dean at the University of Missouri School of Law. And my question is for Casey. You talked about how issue spotting tends to make people risk averse, which is something I generally agree with you about. But should we be selecting different types of people to encourage them to come to law school? Is there a certain temperament of people who are attracted to law school who might be inherently more risk averse than other types?
That's a good way of phrasing the question. I didn't actually mean to leave the impression that issue spotting makes people more risk adverse than, not issue spotting or not teaching. I mostly meant to emphasize that as a framework, it gets in the right direction, I think, but it's a little bit incomplete. Now, that said, the way that you phrase the question is interesting, and when I came to law school, I was an older student, so I came when I was 30 to law school, and I think that I had a little bit of a different perspective, and at that time, this would have been, 2005, there was a lot of movement within the legal academy. Do we need to move more towards getting folks that were a little bit later in line with the trends that were happening with B schools at the time? I have no idea what the current trends are. Or should we continue to do, get younger folks directly out of undergraduate, because frankly that's who the law firms want, so they can ride them hard for a few years because they're still in their 20s, which is a horrible way of thinking about it, but I think that was the reality of the legal market at the time, at least. And I tend to think that those lawyers that, at least now that I moved to the other side of the table and I'm a customer of legal services, those that resonate with me have much broader understanding, as Elizabeth was saying, have a much broader understanding of the world, and are able to connect in their legal advice with, general trends that are happening, or with the business strategy that I'm trying to pursue, or something else besides the really myopic, here's the issue, here's the risk, and here's what I think will come of it. And so having that broader world view, I think, is absolutely crucial in my point of view.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, actually. You focused on the other, Casey mentioned the other dimensions of the risk analysis, risk probability, and impact, and all this. I think we need to add an S, solutions piece to it, because I think from my perspective, if we could find those emerging law students that are more solution-oriented, or have demonstrated their own capacity to take certain risks in their lives and reward that rather than viewing that as a negative thing, I think that would breed a whole new generation of lawyers, right? I think so less of an emphasis on sort of the traditional criteria, more of an emphasis on have they demonstrated in their own lives this capacity to embrace the new and the innovative and the riskier sort of pieces of legal practice.
I'll just add one more thing as an alum of Mizzou. Missouri has an amazing first-year program in lawyering as a problem solver. So that they look at a problem and they don't just spot the issue and say no, but okay, this is the issue. How can we think creatively about this? And so embedding some of just those creative problem-solving pieces in the legal education, I think, is a great start. So go Mizzou.
Right, we have time for one more question. Oh, JB has the microphone. Okay, you go, JB. Then we'll grab one more. Thank you.
Hi, I'm JB Rule at Vanderbilt Law School. And this is a question for any or all of the panelists. So Dean Guthrie described our law and business program and the 5 required courses to get the certificate. If we were going to design a program certificate on legal solutions or legal innovation, what 5 courses would you design and require JD students to take to get that certificate?
Just a footnote, that is the director, the academic director for the program on law and innovation, so he wants your best ideas to implement.
I'm mining you.
Such an academic, always wanting advice for free. Isn't that what consultants are for? I am a little bit against the trend, and I think I'm a little bit with Rita in this regard. I think if you asked a range of lawyers that question that were sort of in the entrepreneur space, you might get a lot of answers about the specifics of technology. In other words, teaching lawyers Python, teaching lawyers this, teaching lawyers that. I don't think necessarily that's a good idea. First off, I think Python's a horrible language. It could do much better in terms of languages. But I'm a little bit of a snob in that regard. I think realistically, from my own perspective, code taught me to be a little bit better lawyer, and I think that having a legal background actually made me a pretty decent coder. That said, I would not encourage that. I think that the keys are, if you wanted to move in that direction, the keys are much more around data analysis and lightweight tools that can understand and make sense out of data. From a technology consumer point of view, I think that lawyers could habitually be better there. I think that having an understanding of process and risk, I mean, I'm talking my own book here, those were my 2 recommendations. I think that those would be at least 3 courses. I don't know if I have 2 more, but I probably could come up with them.
So I think I would begin where Alison left off, which was talking about problem solving. And we recently did a piece of work where I sent 3 people from my team who are strategy consultants. So, they've been trained in the consulting toolkit, and they are born problem solvers. And I sent them to sit down with 30 IP lawyers and interview them repeatedly, from partners right down to associates, to go and understand within the IP practice, what are the problems that these attorneys are facing every day, and how can we apply technology and data to solve those problems. And it's been an experiment, and it's an ongoing experiment. And what we learned from that was that it's damn hard to start a business in legal tech and to find real problems that can really be solved using technology. And so what I would suggest in terms of a course is giving students the opportunity to really identify real-world problems that lawyers faced, for example, in a particular practice area, because the law today is organized by practice areas. And they will take one practice area and then identify, okay, what are the problems in practice that I can help with? And this is not just an efficiency play to try and make a process more efficient. It's not about that at all. It's much more about understanding that if I am an IP lawyer and I need to solve a very difficult trademark litigation problem, what are the different sources of data that I might need to solve that? Or what are the key opinions and expert judgment that will go into it, and how much of it can I gather and separate using technology and data, and how much of it is an experience thing, for example. So it's really trying to identify what are the problems within the law and then looking for the technological solution. So it's not technology searching for a solution, right? It's really trying to identify the key problems and going by practice. I would say that something like that that's much more experiential would be really helpful for somebody, particularly then linking it to specialization. So if I wanted to specialize in a particular practice area.
And we have from the Peanut Gallery a Casey Flaherty surrogate. Marie Bernard is here from Denton's, Innovation Officer for the world's largest law firm, and she offers a course in Microsoft Word. I would add a course in the Microsoft Suite. Because if lawyers understand how to use Excel, Word, and all of the features of those two basic tools, will they be better lawyers?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Just wanted to say that, what are we talking about here? We basically need people who can already work with the current tools, not because we're dinosaurs at law firm and we don't know anything else than Word and Excel. Of course we do. But the basic of what people are going to do when they go through the glass doors of our law firms is not going to be blockchain and anything, and the skills that they learn at a high price at the law schools, they're going, if they don't use them daily, they're going to rapidly become useless. Whilst if you're good and you understand how to put a query using basic functions of Excel, then you have your mind that is already set when my team, and I'll tell you later today, come with more sophisticated products. So let's start also with the basics, and let's make sure that everybody is really trained in those basic tools. Thank you.
Am I live? Okay, thank you. So that we have plenty of time for the table talks, we are going to conclude our Q&A session now. I do want to encourage any and all of you to seek out these speakers if you want to engage in further conversation with them. There will be time during the day. We are now going to spend a little bit of time thinking and talking at your tables, and hopefully this will be I'm really excited actually to hear your ideas, and I'm going to be joined right now by Nancy Heyer. She is an Owen School of Business professor, and she's joining us. So we are trying to model, yes, and I'm going to turn it over to Nancy now. She's going to talk a little bit about the table talks.